To give a little background information, this happened to one of my neighbors, which we'll call her Bethany for the sake of this story. When Bethany was about maybe in her early 20s, I think this was sometime in the early 1990s, she was home alone while her parents were out at work. Now, at the time of this story, her two older brothers have already moved out and started their own lives at their new places. Bethany was alone. Basically, she was working at certain days of the week. However, this happened to be on one of the days she had off from work. And she was really glad to be having at least time to herself when she had the day off of work. While she was home alone, she basically ordered pizza and she was watching TV. But as she was watching TV, however, she heard knocking coming from a glass window. Now, the glass window was not far from the front door, so she thought that maybe it could be the parents' home. But when she went up there, she saw nobody there. This was getting weird, so she thought maybe it might have been some ding-dong ditchers. She went back to watching her TV and even eating pizza. Suddenly, though, she heard what seemed to be knocking again, coming from the back door. She thought that maybe one of her friends snuck into the back just to pull a prank on her. By the time she went to the backyard, she couldn't see anybody and called out if anyone was there. Now, when Bethany was just about to eat her pizza, she then all of a sudden heard a giggle. When she looked over, she could see that there was a silhouette behind the curtains. The silhouette looked to be a woman. Now, Bethany nearly screamed, but she did not even know what to do. She called the police and explained about the whole ordeal, which when the police arrived, they couldn't find that woman. Now, after Bethany explained to her parents about the whole ordeal, her parents just simply brushed it off as she's just overreacting. Bethany had never heard of that laugh from that girl and had no idea if somebody was actually in her house or if she was just imagining things. She still does not know what to think of it. Even though it's been years now, Bethany still has no idea what was even doing laughing outside. She still wasn't sure if it was someone of her friends pulling a prank, or at the very least, it was actually maybe something she heard, but it's probably maybe just her imagination. This has never happened since then, and she still don't know what to believe in anymore. This took place when one of my great friends named Felix was about maybe in his early 30s. This took place, I guess, sometime in 2013. He was a night guard and doing his night shift at a local cemetery that wasn't far from my hometown, probably maybe at least 10 minutes. At one of the cemeteries that he was working in, his job was mainly to make sure no teenagers would come sneak in the middle of the night to damage property. Sure, there were a few times where people, walk by their place, even to pay respects to loved ones, but he doesn't really bother with them. Sometimes when teenagers are caught, usually causing trouble, like, for example, damaging the headstones or etc., putting graffiti, he would chase them out. He does have his guard dog, which at the time, his name was Steve, and his guard dog was a Rottweiler. Steve was very confident in himself, and he was always his best buddy. As Felix was just walking around the place, he mainly looked up to see that there was someone he had not noticed before. At first he thought it might have been somebody coming to pay his respects, but whatever this person was, it took off running, so Felix decided to run after it with Steve. As the two got closer to one of the headstones, they saw that it was the woman was the figure that they saw earlier, was sitting near a headstone. Now the headstone seemed to be maybe possibly a family member of hers, so as Felix walks up to her to try to tap her shoulder to see if she was okay, suddenly she vanished in the thin air. Obviously Felix had no idea what happened, but it really startled him, so he ended up calling the cops. But they could not do anything about it as they couldn't find any evidence to the woman's presence. Now, Felix always thought that maybe he might have been dreaming, but he still had no idea if that woman was still around. He quit the job as a night shift worker, but of course, this was the only night shift story he ever had to tell, and he still does not know what to think of this woman. He had no idea if this woman was just a faker, maybe someone pulling the prank, but he has no idea. What he might have experienced that day was completely paranormal. I think this might have been taking place in 2016. Now, I was visiting my friend's apartment at the time, which was not far from the train line. Now, it does get dark every now and then, so the train line will get foggy and sometimes hard to see. Most of the time, we see a GO train taking people from one city to another, along with some stops to go other cities on the way. Now, my friend at the time of this story, which we'll call him Mitchell, was was moving in, and I, along with my family, were helping him move into his new apartment. The reason why he was moving into a new apartment was because his roommate ended up moving back in with his parents due to him being not financially stable. Mitchell was in that same place too, but he needed somewhere where it would be more affordable with utilities. So, me, along with my family, found a suitable place for Mitchell. Once Mitchell moved in, maybe at least a week later, Mitchell messaged me on Facebook and asked me if I wanted to come and visit him. I asked my mom if it'd be okay if I visited him for a few hours, and my mom was okay with that. She dropped me off and told me just to let her know when I'm ready to be picked up. Now Mitchell did have internet access on his apartment, so I got online on my phone and started updating Facebook and whatnot. As I was doing this, Mitchell ended up saying that he wanted to go for a walk near the train track, which was not far from behind. So I ended up doing this, and it was around maybe on a cloudy, foggy night. It wasn't really nighttime per se, but it was getting close to the evening. So me and Mitchell headed downstairs in his apartment, and we walked out to the back door where we saw a fence that was broken. I had no idea why the fence was broken, but the fence was broken, so me and Mitchell walked out of the apartment property with it. When we got out of there, we ended up walking down a few miles, which were the train tracks. The train tracks were about maybe couple feet away from the apartment, which was no doubt why Mitchell has been hearing the train. We ended up walking on the apartment down, but of course, when we approached the train track, we started to walk over towards whatever direction he chose. He chose to go left, which of course we chose left, and we ended up walking down. But of course, as we were walking down further, we realized that how foggy it was becoming, as it looked like it was going to rain soon. We decided not to go too far, as we had no idea when it was going to rain. When me and Mitchell walked at least a few feet away from the apartment, we saw that there was a train lights heading our way, so we stayed as far away as the track as possible, so that way we don't get into a train accident. As we were walking, though, we saw what seemed to be a silhouette in the distance. We couldn't even tell if it was a child or an adult because it was too close, well, too far to see. When we got close enough, we could see that it was a child, and it appeared to be a little boy, maybe no older than 7. I called out to him and asked him if he was lost, and Mitchell asked him if he was okay and where his parents were. However, the young boy just giggled and started to walk in the opposite direction of us. We walked over to it to him for a few minutes, but realized that he disappeared. Mitchell and I decided that it was our cue to get out of there, so we went back to the apartment. As soon as we got back to the apartment, we were all shocked and confused on what we just saw. Apparently, Mitchell said that there had been rumors that there was a young child that used to live in the same apartment Mitchell does. And apparently the young boy had ran off to play when rumors had it that he was hit by a train. I am not sure if this was actually true or not, but Mitchell had said that there had been paranormal sights of the young boy giggling and laughing. I think that's what we saw that day was paranormal. I really don't know if this was actually true or not, or if you think it's true, but I would like to hear what you think of it. This took place in a very rural area in Wisconsin, and at the time of the story, one of my mom's friends, which we'll call her Kim, was visiting her family in Wisconsin. Not really remembering or remember what sure that the state she was visiting at, but this took place, I guess, in 2017. Kim was visiting her family in Wisconsin, which they owned a little small cattle. The cattle farm they lived in was at least 10 minutes from the nearest town, but of course, to get to a city, it took about a half an hour to 45 minutes, depending on the traffic and etc. Now, while Kim was visiting her family down there, she was just doing her expeditions. She usually does expeditions on discovering new places, going ghost hunting, and etc. She had been doing this for at least a few years now. She remembered telling this to my mom exactly what she remembered, although this had been a few years now, so I am going to do my best to recreate what she and my mom told me. Now, when Kim was visiting her parents, she had to go over outside of the cattle farm to do stuff. She had to go to a hardware store, but on the way there, she noticed a house in the distance. The house did look very old, probably was built maybe in the 1980s, but it seemed to be in really good condition, although it looked like it was rusted from the inside. Kinda looked like an old pioneer house that you've probably seen at the older times, but it wasn't a pioneer house, but it did look similar to it. Kim walked over to see if there was anybody out there, but to her surprise, there was nobody there. She walked up to the door and knocked on it, thinking that somebody might be home, but there was no answer. Kim even then looked inside through the windows, but when she did, she couldn't find anybody, and this was getting really weird. As she was looking there, she ended up opening the door and stepping inside. Once Kim stepped inside, she could see the dust, graffiti, broken glass, and you get the picture. Kim even called out if anyone was there, but to surprise, there was nobody there. Suddenly, she all of a sudden felt something grab her arm, something cold, when she turned around to see that there was no one there. Scared as she was, Kim even ended up running out of the house and going back towards her car, and drove out of there as fast as she could. She was thinking about calling the police after she called her parents and explained about what happened. But she thought that if she called the police, they would not believe her, as that house had been vacant for years and nobody was supposed to be living in that house. Kim even ended up driving back and never went back to that house again. She had no idea if somebody was actually living there, maybe it's some prank, or maybe somebody was really telling her that she could not be in there. Kim at the time of this story was petrified, so it took her at least a few months, but she eventually got over that incident and never had this incident or anything like this similar again. She still wonders why that happened or why she felt someone grabbing her, but whatever it was, it probably was a feel that she shouldn't be there. And this story will always stick with her for as long as she lives. When I was about a kid, maybe in 2010 or maybe 2011, this took place on a field trip to a really popular farm. Now, I can't really remember what really happened, so I am going to tell this the best I can. My friend named Megan and I were teamed up with a few other girls, and we were doing our usual thing. We usually chat about stuff, and we ended up talking more to our friends about what we should do. We had been given a scavenger hunt, which would be a list of items to find, so we ended up going around the ranch. However, though, as we were going more in the ranch area, we found what seemed to be an old wagon, and it looked very old. The wheels were rusted, the box was even thin, probably losing paint mostly. Barely you could see any paint at all. We ended up usually just chilling and relaxing while looking for what things to do. when all of a sudden the wagon moved a few inches. It was at least a few inches from where it was originally was, and we thought somebody might have pushed it. But surprisingly, there was nobody that would have pushed it. So we ended up ignoring it and continuing our search. All of a sudden, we heard the wagon moving more again, and we ended up turning around to see that it was way off from where we last saw it. I realized that something must have been moving the wagon. When we looked around, we couldn't find anybody pushing the wagon, so we assumed that maybe someone might have done this as a prank. We were just usually in doing our thing when all of a sudden we looked to see the wagon actually made some noises, which it sounded like it was moving. We got on the box of the wagon thinking maybe we could find something that is making it. When we got on, all of a sudden Megan felt that someone actually scratched her arm as she screamed. We ended up looking over at Megan's wound and saw that there was scratch marks that looked like an animal. But there was no animals in the cart or anything like that, so we ended up reporting it to the teachers. When we ended up reporting the incident to the teachers took a look at the wagon we discovered and explained, but they couldn't find anybody or any source for that matter doing any kind of thing we explained. I still don't know if this was paranormal or maybe some hoax, but as of this, I don't really know what to believe in. But after this story, I now know that whatever attacked Megan that day was completely paranormal.